This is called Ham. Strength. A priest asking a soul, "Where's your marrow?" Aversions, truth, invective, it wasn't her answers which mattered, only her lying on a bed, being administered shocks until the world grew tired of experimenting with another bit of clay and inward liberties. So it seemed. And when the intern came into the room, asking how she was, and snouting through her chest with drainage tubes, as strong a desire as she'd ever had rose up in her. She must have gestured, or he already knew, because, as if in expectation, he smiled at her and stepped out of Ham's way backward for just a moment. If you make a fresco, if you paint a fresco, you have to know you have to be able to paint very quickly, because by the time the cement hardens, it's too late to finish. And I met a young fellow once in Chartres, in fact, who could never get it right. He'd just about get the painting done, and he wouldn't have any more time to complete it. And he said to me in his bad French, which was no worse than my bad French, "Je ne sais quand," I don't know when. Art. Why, when she gave her memory a mother whose cruelty was godly, and who was beautiful, and the North African boy of 20 in the Paris of her youth, who tore down his fresco at the end of every day because the cement hardened before he could paint his red angels, "Je ne sais quand," he'd say. And memory knew she loved them. Did it refuse to say so? She imagined she saw its gorge fall as after swallowing, and her own mouth felt like cotton. She wanted to write it all down. What could tell her she would have to forget herself, her art, everything, and make herself stare at a lake where a dragonfly stared, at a tree, at nothing, then deposited its eggs in the still water and left, as if it trusted or could go on without. Apology. Already the land is starting to forget gardens. Reminiscences no longer hold the heart completely, as someone held her a little roughly once in somber, sweet groves, and the touch she was utterly dissolute to, that caused collapse behind her knees, sunslides in the lake, she feels a resistance toward. Then apology, as if a thorn catching her sweater has torn a small hole, as if she shouldn't have worn the sweater. What induces then weakens the greater and lesser passions is what she'd like to know. Something like the green underneath red and yellow, which is now wilting, has left her body, and she is someone who had loved, and is no longer availing, and can neither take nor give away. The next poem was Mistaken Identity, one could almost say, where a father had taken his 16-year-old son hunting for the first time. It was quite foggy, and he sent his son out to beat the deer toward him, and then shot him by mistake, completely by error. Soon afterwards, he shot himself, and the question for me became, or not really the question, my response to this came from what from the way I imagined the event. And the event, it seemed to me, proved that not always is suicide a cowardly act. It seemed to me that this may have been the purest act of suicide that I'd ever heard of. We're taught, we have this notion that when people kill themselves, it has something to do with anger at someone else, but I don't think that could have been happening here. I just think he couldn't stand what had happened. The poem is called Pure. He saw that the white-tailed deer he shot was his son. It filled his eyes, his chest, his head, and horribly it bent on him. The rest of the hunting party found him hunkered down in the grass, spattered like a butcher, holding the body as it kept growing colder in his arms. They grasped his elbows, urging him to stand, but he couldn't. He screamed then for Mary and Jesus, who came and were present, unable to bear his babbling, and that he might no longer have to be reproached, the men went to get help. He only had left to him his pure hunter's sense, still clean under his skin. A gun, the example of wounds, a shell's ease in the chamber as he loaded, the speed of the night chill, while his mind like a saint's tried to bear that which God took from his own mind when he could not for another moment. There's a cemetery close to our house, a country cemetery that I walked to last fall and noticed that one of the gravestones was completely bare. Went over to look at it and saw that the name of the inhabitant of the grave had simply peeled away. This was a slate gravestone, and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't put the pieces back. That seemed wrong. So I just took the woman's last name home with me, and it's up on my shelf. That's probably wrong, too. The poem is called Companion of. I felt that this way she would be preserved in some sense, you understand. And yet this great wink of eternity. October was what it had already become when I entered the walled graveyard, the air golden and remote in the last minutes before evening. A bedstand and springs made the gate, pulled aside, and the stones faced the sunset, all those not overturned, flung like cards from the losing player's hand. How long the dead had lain listening, looking back, was written on their markers, granite, sandstone, slate, also marriages, loves, companion of, homely avowals of affection cut in verse. As day relented, I could have sworn there was no more reason than before for agony or joy, that it had been outlived, except I saw one stone with the barest evidence of lettering, a staff with notes unsounded but felt, and I knelt to make out what I could and ran my hand as if over paper over the cool stone. And I found under a cache of yellow crumbling leaves the pried-off surface, broken by the years in 9 uneven pieces. What else was I meant to do for Mary Hyatt but take home the words for her? Then it was impossible not to imagine her days and nights, especially her nights, when the air seems to suffer most from all that has come and what is no longer likely to come. She enters the rooms I lend her, humming a melody whose words she's nearly forgotten. How significant and strange the badly remembered air. It gets in her blood, no forget-me-not gayer for the neck and face, and the absent lover is everywhere. In the shadows, frost on the panes, a soliloquy over the piano or the card game. Before bed, she writes him a letter. The last time we met, you had less and less to say, and though I felt I understood your private musings, joys, memories of past experiences altogether your own, ghosts, guilts, pains, I felt my own words falling away from me. One quiet bred another. In the end, we forgot to say goodbye. Tell me, next time we meet, you'll read to me the lines of poetry you are so fond of, that I once heard you say with all the passion of youth that so moved us both, though we are no longer young. Without the trouble of saying a thing meant, the meaning comes into suspicion, and if nothing is meant, the thing isn't worth recall. I think I know your thoughts, but it is better to hear them from your mouth. I long for you. He responds, and everything is as it was. Her cheeks burn, and her hands tremble for years, until chance, seedy and blind, ruins them. In the fresh dark, there are no words left for this. It is better so. Worse to hear it from human lips than in the clattering leaves a rancid song, or in the night owl's scream. Thank you.